Sorry, whilst we've got emails coming in and people saying they can't come and people giving us emails about other things as well. So yeah, if we're a little bit distracted, that's what's going on. But we will carry on admitting people as Jane does the introduction. So I'm going to hand over to you, Jane.
Thank you, Finn. As I was saying, your workbook that goes with this session today is digital. It's got all the links that you should need in there. It's quite a small, short booklet, but there is lots of information in there and the key takeaways from the session today. Obviously, Finn is unable to do the whole book in 45 minutes, but these are the key takeaways really from today. But the book is there to pre-order. You've got the link there in your pack. If you click on any of the pictures in the pack, it should take you directly to the link, so you don't necessarily have to look for the link there for you.
Okay.
Right, so for those of you who don't know us, and I know there are a number of people on there that do, my name is Jane Miller and this is Finola Wilson, or Finn.
Hi.
And the two of us are Impact Wales, and we've been working with schools for well, up to 10 years now, isn't it? Well, over 10 years on pedagogy, curriculum for Wales, but very much more so over the last 4 or 5 years on things that address or work towards closing the disadvantage gap, which is where this session is going to be focused on today. So that's really where the session is going. Finn has written the book,
yes,
and Finn has drawn all of the sketch notes that are within that book as well, and she will be talking through a lot of those that are key as we're going through.
Right, and you'll have to forgive me because the way this is set up, I'm the only person who can let people in, and I have to look at my iPad and look at the screen. So if it's a little bit jerky just for a couple of minutes as we start, please forgive me. Okay, so let's get things started. Well, to start off with, I wanted to share with everybody the breadth of the problem. So I'm going to share some data with you so you can see. I'm going to hand that over to Jane so you can go through the next slides as well. So this data that you can see, this is actually from England. And the reason that I'm sharing data with you from England, for those of you who are from Wales, is because we don't have data like this for Wales, unfortunately. So I'm going to have to start with England to show you the breadth of the problem. And you can see this is the disadvantage gap as it appears at the end of primary school over 2011 to 2023. And of course, COVID made a significant problem, created a significant problem and increased the problem. And at the end of secondary school, you can see that there's more than 10 months attainment gap in the process. So you can see that there are 10 months. So I'm trying to do two things. There's a 10-month gap between those who are advantaged, come from advantaged backgrounds, and those who come from less advantaged backgrounds. If we look at GCSEs, and again, this is for England, the situation gets even worse. So this is the disadvantage gap for GCSE English and Maths at 2023, and it's risen to its largest level since 2011. And the disadvantage gap is approximately 18 months. So we're talking a significant difference, several grades in some cases for pupils in Maths and English, obviously those really important things. Can we click through to the next slide, please, Jane? Okay, so this is the only data that really shows the situation for Wales. And this data, what it shows you is the difference between the disadvantage gap, the persistent disadvantage gap at GCSE.
It's been recorded.
Sorry, can we?
Yeah.
Mute Paige Tilbury, Tybury, can you mute your? Thank you. This is persistent disadvantage over time for FSM pupils who are FSM for 80% of their career. And this is the difference between England and Wales. And you can see here that Wales is significantly worse situation than it is for England. The book's actually written from the international perspective. So it's written for disadvantage wherever in the world you are. So if you're not either in England or in Wales, then this is still relevant for you. The book is still relevant for you. But certainly for those of you who are from Wales, I know a lot of people here are from Wales today. There are two issues that are really, really important. Or sorry, I should say 3 issues that are really important around data. One is the situation is worse in Wales than it is anywhere else in the UK. And that's not just based on the level of deprivation that we experience in Wales. the level of poverty that experienced in Wales. This particular screen is from the Institute for Fiscal Studies, and their report came out in March of 2024, that actually the poverty difference between England and between Wales is that there's not that much of a difference. So in fact, the difference is actually what children are experiencing in school. So it's not just where they're coming from, but actually what they're experiencing. And surprisingly, Eston actually don't have a thematic report on closing the gap, nor any specific actual data on it, which is really quite concerning. We also have Welsh Government historic data. It's based on the CAP 9 points score at GCSE, which of course you can't actually describe the CAP 9 point score in terms of months difference. So we've got a real problem in Wales in that we can't see in any great detail what the difference is at a national level. But based on this particular slide, you can certainly see what the difference is going to be, because the gap is massive. And it is so much worse since COVID. Overall, the average for the number of months difference in reading between non-FSM pupils, so advantaged pupils, and EFSM pupils in Wales is 21 months. That's the average difference. For those pupils who are in the Welsh medium education sector, because they have very different problems there, and it's not any lack of teaching. This is mainly where children are coming from and their experience during COVID. The average difference in reading standards is 29 months. So, 19 months for procedural numeracy for pupils in Wales. The gap just gets wider as children go through the education system. This is Stanovich's Matthew effect, that those who have will have more, those who have less it will be taken away from. For some learners, they're never going to catch up. And that's really why I wrote this book. And it's something I'm incredibly passionate about. It's something that's really important to me, because research shows that low literacy levels with poor academic outcomes. And not just that, long-term unemployment, sickness, shorter life expectancy. I just want to give you one stat just to show you what that actually looks like. At the extremes, a boy in Stickton Town Centre, which is in the Midlands, has a life expectancy of age 64. If that boy was brought up in North Oxfordshire, they have a life expectancy of 90. That's 26 years different. If you're from a disadvantaged background and you have a low level of early reading and poor academic outcomes, therefore you're actually at increased risk of mental health issues and a greater likelihood of being sent to prison. Up to 50% of current prisoners have difficulties reading. To start this presentation, now we know the breadth of the problem, and it really is terrible. David Didai actually in a recent Research Ed presentation said something really important, and I think this is a really useful way of looking at the disadvantage gap, is that more socially disadvantaged students are often successful despite what we do. Less socially advantaged students are often successful because of what we do, are only successful because of what we do. So if we get it right, for those at the bottom end of the advantage spectrum, we're going to get it right for everybody. So really, when we're thinking about what you do in your schools, what you do in your classrooms, it should be almost entirely focused on getting it right for disadvantaged pupils, because that will benefit everybody. Jane.
Okay, so our focus for this afternoon is, as you will go through your pack as well, there are some notes from, or some feedback from head teachers that we've worked with in particular on some of the strategies that are there within the booklet. So what you're going to get today as part of the process is we're going to look very clearly about what this idea of where deliberate practice really sits as part of closing the gap. So within the classroom, things that we can be focused on to make that difference. We're going to look at actually defining what disadvantage actually looks like. And I think we've all got an understanding of what we think disadvantage looks like, but we want to explore that a little bit further. And this idea of let's get high quality teaching right and making sure that it's really working for our learners. We're taking it back to what we do in the classroom is really going to make that difference. And also then at the end, we're going to give you 4 key steps that you can take within your school that you can put into practice, or go back and look to see where you are in that process to support your disadvantaged learners.
Before we go on to the next slide, I just want to come back to the third of those bullet points. We're not just going to look at the high quality teaching that it does work, because research shows us that it does work, but we're going to unpick why it works, because I think this is something that is often missed in classrooms, in schools, the foundational understanding that teachers need to have in order to make really good choices in the classroom. Because it's all very well and good being given a strategy and implementing that strategy, but if you don't understand why you're implementing or why it works, then it's very difficult to choose it at the right moment. So that's what we're going to focus on today.
If there are any questions that crop up as we go through the next section, please pop them in chat and we'll monitor that and address those as and when is the most appropriate time.
Okay, I'm going to take this back.
You take that back, yeah.
Take the clicky back so I know where I'm going. Okay. So here are the contents of the book. So you can see here all of the different elements of the book. And I'm only going to focus on 4 of those. And you can see that there's a lot more to the book than what I can fit into 45 minutes. But I thought I was trying to identify the key things that you could take away today and actually really think about and consider it in your own context and do something with. Before I look at those in any great detail, I wanted to just go back to how the book has been written, what I thought was important based on the research that we know about changing practice. And change of practice or improvement comes from actually practicing things. So the improvement challenges, you can see there on the presentation in front of you, you see the chart. There's some really interesting research from Hobbes et al., which looked at the correlation between teaching practice improvement and how it starts to flatten out after around about 5 years, and how habits are formed in a similar format. So they also start to flatten out after 5 years. And this is because teaching actually happens within a hot and very complex environment. So you have to learn very quickly about how to carry out all of the things that you need to do in a way that makes sense to you, in a way that manages your cognitive load. And I think this is something that's often missed about teaching, is that teaching is high cognitive load. So what needs to happen when you are learning how to do different things is you need to be aware of managing that cognitive load. And one of the ways to manage cognitive load is actually to improve the amount of practice that you have. So how I have written the book is based on that research. It is structured around research evidence. So identifying what research tells us about things that we can do, things that we need to understand in order to change that disadvantage gap. There's lots of discussion in the book about what that means for teaching and making sense of it. There's opportunities for you to discuss it as well. This is supported by sketch notes, because seeing information visually reduces your cognitive load. So it makes the book easier to assimilate, easier to understand, easier to actually put into practice. And then that is supported by all of these different ways of changing your approach to what you do in the classroom. So it's thinking about deliberate practice tasks, it's discussion and reflection questions, there's tools, there's action plans, there's templates, and there's worked examples. And I think the worked examples is something I really focused on in the book, because it's all very well and good to be shown something in theory, but you want to see how that actually looks. And I have included not just good worked examples, because actually they're of very limited value, but actually I've included quite a lot of poor worked examples, or what a bad one looks like, to give you a chance to identify. And I've always explained this is what hasn't worked in this particular example and why it hasn't worked. because that's a much more effective way of helping you to engage with the content. Because I know if you're anything like me, you'll read professional learning books and you'll see something in the book and think, oh, that's really great. And then a couple of days later, you've forgotten about it because, you know, work has overtaken it. But if you actually carry out a task or think about a question with your colleagues and discuss it, and then go through the answers together, that's a much better way, a much more practical way of making sure that actually what you want to be changing is actually making a change. So let's start with what educational disadvantage is. Okay, and sorry, I should also say that at the end of each chapter, there are bullet points. So if you're particularly time poor, what I would encourage you to do as soon as you get the book, read all of the key takeaways at the end of all of the chapters, and you will have the basis of the book. And there's probably around about, I don't know, 50 bullet points, and the book is summarized in those 50 bullet points. So this is going to be a question for everybody now. And what I'm going to ask you to do is to actually take part in this as a professional learning activity, because you know you've got yourself a ticket to a free webinar, so you might as well use it as an opportunity to develop your own understanding as well. And this is what the research tells us works particularly well. It's a pre-question. That is asking a question of you before you've actually had the content explained to you. So I am well aware of the fact that you actually may not be fully ready to answer this question, but that's kind of the point. So have a think about the question. How would you define disadvantage? Have a think about the question for yourself. And in a second, I'm going to ask you to type your answer into the chat. Jane will, what's the word I'm looking for here, Jane? Monitor. Thank you. I said that, but you've been hearing her. So it's going to monitor the chat, because this is a useful opportunity for you to bring up to the top of your memory all of the things that you can connect the new learning that I'm going to share with you in a second with. So just take a moment. How would you define disadvantage? Start typing your answer into the chat now, but I'm going to ask you to press send at the same time, so you're not influenced by other people. I'm just going to take a moment to allow you to do that. Okay, before I ask you to press send, I'm just going to turn our camera off so that you're not distracted by us sitting in our office and you can focus on the presentation. Okay, so you should be typing your what is disadvantage into the chat. Can I ask you to press send as soon as you've typed it in, please? How would you define disadvantage? Oh gosh, they're flying in.
And this is when I panic, because I'll scroll back through to it so quick.
Right, just pick out a few and we'll talk about a few.
Okay. We've got need, lack of resources, lack of home space, that sort of idea, food poverty. And I am randomly picking up here. We've got low income households, so we've got that financial aspect, you know, that not having access to necessary resources. Vanessa said, but less advantage than we would expect, so basic needs. Not having the same resources or opportunities available to you as others do. But we've also got that from Karen, barriers caused by social or economic situations that stop pupils benefiting from education. So it's a little bit wider than that, isn't it? And Katrin said where quality of life and standard of living is below what's reasonable today, which could be economic, could be social, could be health, lots of different things. Let me just pick another one. They're all very long, similar on the same thing. Finance again comes up a lot. Katie said where there's an inequality in opportunities for all.
Okay, so educational disadvantage, this is actually how it is defined in the 1998 Education Act. I'll give you just a second to look at that there. Okay, now one of the reasons that you have probably focused on economic disadvantage over social disadvantage is because of the way in which we measure disadvantage. Disadvantage is largely, not wholly, but largely measured in national statistics through eligibility for free school meals. There are other measures such as looked after children if you've experienced the care system, and different countries within the UK measure it in slightly different ways, and of course around the world as well. But largely speaking, educational disadvantage is measured through financial, economic means. But actually, it's the social side of disadvantage that is much more important for us as educators. When we're thinking about disadvantage, we need to think about what disadvantage is in terms of the experience for children. And I'm just going to talk you through some research around what disadvantage actually looks like. So disadvantage may mean occasional inattention. So if you think about if you're living in a economically disadvantaged family where you've got both parents are working 2 jobs and they are struggling to make ends meet, but they're very caring, nurturing family, and they really focus on giving pupils, or giving their children, sorry, not their pupils, their children, as much attention as they can. But through no fault of their own, they may end up giving occasional inattention. Now, occasional inattention is not a bad thing because it allows children to actually begin to work things out for themselves, to realize that they may not be the center of their parents' universe and so on. But if we take this a little bit further, we have the potential of chronic understimulation. And this is one of the reasons why COVID has made a bigger difference, because we had that whole section of time where children were at home, but so were parents, but parents had a job to do, or they were worried about, you know, how they were going to make ends meet, and those kinds of processes. And if we take it a little bit further, and then we start talking about severe family neglect, and again, this is a situation that is not actually linked directly, in all cases, to economy, to financial situations. You may have very well appointed families where the parents are suffering from a mental health issue themselves, or they have a personality disorder. I mean, you might think that these are actually quite rare, but they're much more prevalent in the general population than we would expect. Personality disorders can be anything from 5 to 10% of the population. So when we're thinking about what that means for the child, is they might be learning that their calls for attention or their need for support is actually not happening. And of course, for pupils and children who experience the care system, there are cases, and we've seen some terrible programs on the TV about severe institutional neglect, where multiple children are being neglected all at the same time. Now, what's happening in this process is that what we might see as, you know, the issue is that children aren't going on a school trip. And of course, every child should have the opportunity that every other child has. So we shouldn't be those children who maybe don't have a lot of money at home shouldn't be missing out on going on a school trip. But that really is very much the surface level. We might have pupils who don't get the opportunity to talk about the theatre or go to the theatre or read books together with their parent and so on. We might have pupils who are experiencing at home food poverty. But what that food poverty does is it creates worry and concern for the families as well, and worry and concern for the parents involved. We might also have situations where there's actually a lack of physical or emotional safety. And, you know, if you're living with a parent who has enough money, but they're also an alcoholic, or you're living with a family where you have a step parent and a step parent is abusive. So we have a situation where disadvantage is measured purely or largely economic terms, but it's actually a very different story for the children who experience this. So disadvantage in this kind of situation, which is not the worst situation, where we have, maybe it's for a short period of time, maybe it's for the first 6 months of their life and then they're adopted, or maybe it's for 6 months where they're living with step family, or maybe you know, it could be a much longer term, but there are these kinds of issues. So it causes a delay in physical development. And when we're thinking about the physical development that's required to learn to write, we've got teachers who are reporting currently children who are not able to sit up and sit on the carpet for long periods of time because they haven't built the core strength to be able to do that. So we've got emotional regulation. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more detail in a second. That means managing your own emotions so that you can react in a way that is appropriate for the situation. We might have limited ability to actually manage our understanding of other people. So psychology, the psychological skills of managing how we interact with other people or what we expect from a certain situation, and of course, low cultural knowledge. But what's been fascinating when I've been writing this book is to recognize what these experiences are like and what they do to pupils' brains, because there's this expectation that disadvantage is simply a gap in learning. And it's so much more than that. What disadvantage actually is a change to children's brain structure. Now, I know that that seems really dramatic, but that's actually what's happening, is that their experience of their disadvantaged upbringing is actually changing the way they think about themselves, the way they think about the world, their ability to engage with learning, which is why schools aren't really the key driver of closing the disadvantage gap. But understanding that is a change in pupils' brains and the way they think and their cognition will help you to think about what's the best approach for this. So, for example, if a child is upset and they want to share how they feel, they want to get some kind of reassurance, they want to get some comfort, but there's nobody at home who has the capacity to or the time to listen. And I say that, you know, from parents who are dealing with multiple other issues, mental health issues, anxiety, significant work, and so on. That child may actually end up learning that the only time that adults listen to them is when they shout. Now, what that means for when they come into school is that they have already formed a habit, which is they are already emotionally dysregulated. So their engagement method with education is to, when things get difficult and their feelings get high, they shout. And that's when you get children who come into school and they need additional thrive and nurture. But we have, as schools, been working on the premise that children who are in this group who struggle with emotional dysregulation require an additional intervention. But actually, we're in a situation now, having just seen the data, that actually this is something that all teachers need to be looking at. It's something that our mainstream provision now needs to think about, because there are three facets to disadvantage. It's a three-legged stool. You need all three things to be an effective learner. You need to be able to retain learning. So your academic performance needs to be good. You also need to be able to regulate your emotions, because learning is an emotional experience. You know, that light bulb moment. Sorry, if you've got your microphone on, could we mute it, please? That would be great. Thank you. So if you remember those moments for yourself, when you learn something or you work something out or you figure something out, it's that fist bump moment, you know, that's a really emotional experience, because it releases hormones. And actually making sure that we are addressing emotional regulation through what we are teaching, and I'll talk to you about that in a second, is really important. This is not about schools bringing in a whole range of emotional regulation strategies as a separate entity. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about high quality teaching that supports emotional regulation. The same with executive functioning. Executive functioning is the idea of your kind of higher order cognitive functions, such as working memory, prioritization, planning, all of those kinds of things, the kind of learning to learn, metacognition side of learning. Again, this isn't about schools actually having a separate learning to learn program, because the learning to learn is best done during the actual content. So this is something that you need to think about. your process of developing learning using metacognition as part and parcel of your everyday work. Because when we have difficulty retaining learning, that's when issues happen. And of course, these are things like ensuring that learning is desirably difficult enough, increasing the use of retrieval practice, all of those. And there's a whole chapter in the book just focused on desirable difficulties and how to make that work and how to develop it in your school. And that's, I think, probably one element of teaching that schools are getting much, much better at, particularly in England, but also in Wales. We're seeing much more of the cognitive science of learning being used in schools. But that's only one of those three legs of the stool. Emotional dysregulation, not being able to manage or inhibit your responses effectively. So inhibitory control is something that happens when children they learn this in the early years, and this is set before children actually arrive at school. So creating teaching in class that helps pupils to relearn emotional regulation, to relearn that process of actually managing their emotions so that they can persevere when things get hard, show a level of resilience. I mean, these are the kinds of things that we hear time and time again when we go out to schools that teachers and children are struggling with. I mean, Jane, you'll agree with me around resilience and independence.
Yeah.
Okay, and the final idea is the executive functioning. So being able to actually manage problems and plan and organize and think about things in a different way. This is something that is really common in schools. So we know that, you know, educational disadvantage has never been higher than it is before. And we know that schools are not just seeing this in their EFSM pupils or LAC pupils, they are seeing this in pupils outside of that group as well, the invisible disadvantage. So I'm just going to ask you a question. Here are some skills that fit into those two kind of additional legs of the stool, the emotional and psychological and executive functioning. Just have a look through these, and in a moment, I'm just going to ask you to choose just one from these two lists that you think causes the greatest impact on pupils' learning. So just take a moment and then write into the chat which one of those creates the greatest problem for pupils. And I'm going to ask Jane to help us by
I will.
I'm
just busy trying to respond to, because a couple of people are still having difficulty
getting in.
So I'm just trying to, although they might as well just wait for the recording now. So
yeah. Okay, so if you can actually start writing into the chat what your pupils have most problems with.
And I can see straight away some of the things that Finn has already been talking about, and, you know, going back to, you know, being in the classroom. Yeah, yes, these are things that are coming up time and time again that we're supporting schools with, because these are the issues that seem to be, you know, regardless of where your school is and what age group your children are. These are some of the problems that are coming up. So we've got about starting tasks, focusing, staying focused. That's coming up a lot, and paying attention. It's that whole, you know, paying attention, staying focused. We've got lots and lots of that through. Trying to find something that's different now. There's lots of understanding different points of view. Yeah, I think that's key as well, isn't it? Again, lots and lots of focus. Quite interestingly, one of the things that we've been working with a lot with schools is around speech and language.
Okay, so there's a lot of, I mean, you've all given very common problems. This is the problems that we see a lot. I'm just very aware of the time, so we're going to move on quickly. And as I say, I can't give you the whole book, but we talk about identifying disadvantage. I'm saying we because I'm thinking about Impact Wales, but I talk about identifying disadvantage in the book in a great deal, because we know that for those pupils who are identified as EFSM pupils, that there is a big gap between them and everybody else. But there's also pupils who are not accessing free school meals, but are disadvantaged or come from a disadvantaged background. And it's about gathering data that you probably already have, but actually correlating that data from multiple different sets to identify those pupils who you need to really focus on and those pupils who you need to actually give different types of support on. I go into that in a lot more detail. There's worked examples in there of data sets and so on, and tasks for you to carry out as well, so to look at that. But I just wanted to go on to this 3 layers of support. This is actually from the National College of School Leadership, who published a paper back in 2011 looking at schools who were very, very effective in closing the disadvantage gap. What were they doing? And one of the things that they were doing was dividing their layers of support into 3 separate layers. And it made sense to actually think about it in terms of an egg. And we've got the 3 layers of support. We've got a kind of purely financial level of support, which schools are very, very good at. We've got a lot of poverty proofing of the school day and the school life going on, providing subsidizing for this. We've got community engagement officers who work very well with schools, and they are specifically focused on the EFSM element of disadvantage. But from what I've just talked about, that's actually just very much surface level, because that doesn't change pupils' brains, what they actually learn with. We've then got, and this is really important, underperforming pupils. And I think this is really important for schools to identify, is which of your pupils are not achieving what they should be achieving. And that comes from predictive tasks and from Yellis and from CATS, those kinds of scores. But those who you would expect to be further along in their learning. But this is the one that I think schools need to really focus on. What is it that you're doing across the whole school that will benefit, as David Didai said, that will benefit those who need it the most, that those who will only make progress because they're getting what they need. And I'm just going to focus on these areas today because of the limit in time, is just looking at those quality teaching and learning and thinking about how that works at whole school, but also how it works for for underperforming pupils, because it should be pretty much the same thing for both of those cohorts. So I'm not going to ask you this question to answer in the chat, because I think we're running out of time a little bit here, but it's thinking about, where is your support the best? At what layer are you working at best? Because in fact, the layers that are the most important are those 2. Those are the 2 that are going to make a difference to the brains, the learning of the children, because it's those that are going to save them as adults, their ability to be independent and think for themselves. So which are you best at? And I'm going to go back to, I talk about learning a lot, the process of learning in the book and how learning happens, because understanding how learning happens for the average child will help you to understand how learning has gone wrong or they are struggling for children who have come from these very disadvantaged backgrounds. And something that you've all brought up in your, what are they struggling with the most? A lot of people are coming up with that very first step, that focus or that attention on what they are learning from the environment. And there are lots of things that you can do to help that focus or that attention. But also we've got pupils who are struggling with working memory, so sustaining attention or actually organizing and planning. That all happens in the working memory. All the processing of learning happens in the working memory. Again, there are things focused on managing that working memory capacity that can happen in every classroom. We probably don't have as many. I'm just having a quick look through. There don't seem to be as many pupils who are struggling with the long-term memory, because if you don't get those first 2 things right, the focus and the processing, it doesn't really matter what you've got in your long-term memory, because they're the kind of bottleneck for what happens later. And when we think about your working memory, which is where all the learning happens, can only hold 4 to 7 items for 3 to 30 seconds. That's really significant. If you're asking pupils to write about something that they read last week, they've got to think about what they've read. They've got to think about full stops, capital letters, and so on. And it's that process of being easily distracted. And these are the things that you brought up. So these are pupils who are living in a situation at home where they are chronically understimulated. And this is causing problems, constant self-esteem issues. But this is where full engagement tasks, having high expectations, and there's a whole chapter on high expectations, means making sure every single child is engaged in their learning. This means using multiple choice questions, think, pair, share, mini whiteboards, core response, COCL, and so on. Thinking about processing, and these are key issues here, low-level destruction, task abandonment, these things have got worse. Behavior has got worse since COVID happened. It's things like using more worked examples. And you may already be using worked examples, but maybe you're not using them enough, or you're not using them for long enough, or you're not using variations of a worked example in order to make sure that your learners are actually, their cognitive load is being managed. So there's lots of strategies, tools, templates, worked examples in the book to help you to use some of these strategies. And I think it's really important to think about, is the quality of teaching actually reaching all of your pupils? So I want to kind of end with 4 things that you can do in your classroom that will make a difference to the pupils who need it the most. Understand what they're actually dealing with. And that isn't just about how much money they've got. That's about what their home life, what their home experience is, how that's a barrier for them thinking about learning when they come into your school. Because if you're cold, if you're hungry, obviously that limits your cognitive load. If you're stressed, if you are never emotionally regulated, if you don't feel safe, psychologically safe, that limits your cognitive load as well. Make sure you use full engagement learning tasks. If some pupils aren't focused on the learning, that is the teacher's responsibility. That's our job. And there are lots of strategies in the book to help you manage that, to help every teacher do that. There's a whole chapter on oracy. Oracy is an incredibly powerful tool because we think with words, we talk with words, we read words, we speak with words. But there's a whole section on the process of articulating your thinking improves your learning. And pupils who are coming from disadvantaged background where talk doesn't happen at home, reading doesn't happen at home, they need this even more. So there's loads of strategies and tools and templates and action plans in the book to help with that. And then make sure that what you're doing is making a difference. I mean, if there was a 4-step plan for closing the disadvantage gap, that would be it based on research. One last thing I want to mention before we close or we start taking questions, if there are any questions, is that in the book there are sketch notes throughout the book. But what's fabulous about Routledge, the publisher, is they have their own website where all of these resources have been uploaded, and every time you buy the book, you will get a code to download the resources. So you can download them, print them out, use them. That's your right as a purchaser of the book. And I hope that if you've purchased the book, that you do download them and you do use them, because, I really want to make a difference to the pupils out there. So I hope you can as well. So there's what other people have thought about the book, those people who have read it so far, and we're back on screen. I'm very excited to see it come out on the 24th of April.
Well, you have lived and breathed. I've lived and breathed in book for a long time, so it'll be nice to see it actually out in print. I think we're waiting for the first couple of copies to come in the post over the next week or so. So it'll be exciting,
very exciting.
I think we just had a question from Alex, and I think it's relevant for everybody. She's asked about sending the link out. How is it going to be available? So what we'll do is I will send you the link to this webinar once I've worked out the best way to reach everybody. And somebody's also said, please could you add the link for the book? If you click in your digital pack,
you don't need to,
or you could just scan that QR code,
scan the QR code.
You've got the link in your pack. If you just click on the book, the actual picture of the book, it should take you directly to Amazon, where you can.
Or you could just press, if you've got your phone in front of you, just scan the QR code on the screen now, and you can print the QR code, and then you can find that.
Thank you, Julia.
That's
Nice to
my
see you,
pleasure.
Julia.
If there are any questions, we'll hang around for a couple of minutes in case anybody wants to ask us a question.
If you don't feel like this is the forum to do that, you've also got our contact details at the end of the pack. Finola@impact.wales. So there you go.
Go there.
Yeah, there is also our Facebook group, our private Facebook group. If you're not a member of that, please click on the, I can't say it now, click on the QR code and you can join the Facebook private group where you get some further details on this as well. But if there is anything in particular you want to explore, just drop us an email or pick up the phone and we will be there.
And I just noticed, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jock and Vararan, for everybody who's said thank you. Hope it makes a difference. And if you do, just one last plea, if you do read the book and you like it, could you leave a review on Amazon?
That would
be
no,
just leave an honest review, because I you know, honest reviews are what we're looking for, and I'm hoping that you actually really like the book and you found it useful. So thank you very much. Brilliant. Okay, thank you, Karen, everybody. Yeah, looking forward to hearing what you think of the book, and I can't see any questions coming up.
I think we've got lots of thanks.
Yes,
as well. But if there are any questions that I've missed, I don't think there have been. They've mainly been responses to the questions, but we will. Oh, there you go. Hang on, saying that. Would it be possible to be sent the digital pack? Yes. The digital pack was sent out on the email on Tuesday, but I will send the link out, Emily, to you. I'm going to make a note, Emily. Missed the email somewhere. Emily.
Okay, so I think we can download the chat afterwards.
Oh, thank you, Adam. I'm not sure if that's gone as a link, Adam, or not. I don't know.
I don't think it has gone as a link. I don't think you can add a link, but I'm just going to go back to the book if you want to order the book. But the obviously the digital pack is going to be a very poor version of the book. So for just a little bit more, you could buy the book and have all of the stuff in there.
If you have asked me to send you the digital pack and you haven't received it by first thing tomorrow, just drop me an email at jane@impact.wales and I'll make sure, because there's quite a few people that have asked this. Oh, there you go. Adam's already sent the link. Thank you, Adam. So if you look in the chat, Adam has sent the link, Closing the Gap webinar. That should give you the digital pack alongside it. Okay, right, we're going to come to call that to an end. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending. And hang on, let me stop recording. Yeah, stop recording before we finish.